right, John chapter 13. I do want to thank Nicole for singing that song again. She sang that just a few weeks ago, but it needed to be sung again. It's a beautiful song, and Nicole does an extraordinary job on it, so thank you for that. John chapter 13, if you've been with us for any length of time, you'll know that I often get frogs in my throat. You'll know that we have been studying Jesus for a while, on and off, through a series we've entitled Jesusology. If you've just joined us or if you're just tuning in for the first time, we are in a lengthy study. We are on our 27th section or chapter, if you would, of this series, and it's been a fun series for me, personally studying it, but it's been refreshing for me to see the congregation embrace all of Christ, meaning there's just been a very healthy amount of appreciation for who He is, and that's why we're here. We're here to worship Christ, we're here to serve Christ, and we are here to help people find and follow Jesus Christ. But I have to say this, the end is near as it pertains to our study. We're not going to finish today, but we are coming quickly to the end of our study. And I'll say this, though, if you really want to learn about Christ, if you really want to know who Jesus is, the study will never end. You'll spend the rest of your life trying to understand Him, to figure Him out, because He's so much more than just what we see in the pages of Scripture. If you walk with Him and if you talk with Him, you will find Him to be more beautiful with every passing day. Now, I met Jesus Christ for the first time when I was but a few years old. May 11th, 1983, I met Him, called Him my Savior. And I learned about Him as I could in my childhood mind, and as I became a teenager, I learned more, and as I became an adult, I learned more. And with every passing year that I spend in this world, He becomes more beautiful, He becomes more precious, He becomes the reason that I want to go to heaven. It's not just to escape a wicked world or to get freedom from my sin. All those are part of it, but I can't wait to finally worship Him face to face and dwell with Him. Paul the Apostle told the Ephesians that he was blessed to preach among them, quote, the unsearchable riches of Christ, unquote. It's a really fascinating phase because Paul understood there are riches in Christ that you should be seeking out, you should be searching, but they're really unsearchable. You'll never get to the bottom of the chest that has all of the riches in it called Jesus Christ. You'll never know everything there is to know about Him. You'll never have Him figured out. You'll never be able to know everything He has thought or thinks about. It really is an eternal search and pursuit. And unlike with people, you'll never discover anything about Him that disappoints you. Some of you may be doing this. Some of you may have done this. Some of you may do this, where you go onto a dating site or a dating app, or you have friends who are trying to hook you up with a person to, date and marry someday. And you may have found that as you get to know people, eventually there is something about them you really don't like. And that's why sometimes you go through lots of names before you either give up on the effort or you find the right person. It's not because that right person's any better, frankly, than everyone else. You've just learned to say, man, they're all broken. They're all a mess. So I might as well just get one now. But everybody has a skeleton in their closet or some type of cockroach on their shoulder that you eventually discover, and you say, I don't like them. And that's true, too, for people that we look at on the TV screen or we look at in history and we read about them and think, wow, that person's amazing and that person's extraordinary, and just keep reading. Just keep reading the story. Eventually, you'll find out, man, everybody thinks he's the cat's meow, but he was a terrible person. Or everyone will look she's just amazing, until you keep talking to people. Eventually, you'll find out, no, nobody's amazing in this world. Everybody has something that we just don't want to deal with, we don't like. Jesus is unlike everyone in the world. He doesn't have any skeletons in any closet somewhere. He doesn't have any imperfections. There are no flaws. There are no fleas. There isn't a person you're going to talk to that can properly represent Him and say, yeah, there's a dark side to Jesus. No, there's no dark side to Christ. He is beautiful, and He is satisfying from every angle and in every way. And that's the Jesus we have been studying. Last week, we transitioned from Jesus in the past, or Jesus the past, to Jesus the present. We looked at Jesus the risen and how after 40 days of resurrecting from the dead, he then ascended. And we looked at Jesus the sitting, the seated, where he has sat down on the right hand of God. And he has been there, according to the Bible, for the past 2,000 years, sitting at the right hand of God, mediating on behalf of mankind to God. And he has been working in the lives of men and women from that high and lofty place. But this morning, we're going to go backwards a little bit into Jesus the past to learn something about him in the present. So that's why we're in John 13. John 13 is a very intimate chapter. This is Jesus Christ just before his crucifixion, just before his arrest, just before his betrayal by Judas. The Gospel of John is the most intimate of all four Gospels. Matthew is recording his life with not as much precision as John, but he's giving you more of his life. And Mark and Luke are similar in that they give more of his life, but less detail. John gives less of his life and a lot more detail. John gives us a glimpse into Jesus' mindset and into his ministry on the eve before he dies in great detail. Do you know 6 chapters in John are the evening before Jesus Christ dies? So we get a lot more of those final moments and that intimacy. So here we are in John 13. Jesus has just observed, are you ready for it? The Passover Seder with his disciples. That's a plug. Come join us on March 18th because you're going to be able to see what they did. Most Christians will say, I know what they had at the Passover Seder. They had bread and grape juice. Because that's what we do for communion. And that's all you read about in the Bible. Isn't that true? You don't read about anything else. But by the time Christ came on the scene, the Passover was much more than that, even though the book of Exodus tells you it's more than what you read about in the Gospels. And that's why you'll learn about the Seder, and you'll have a greater appreciation for what happened. Jesus and his apostles, they didn't just sit down, have a quick meal, and then talk about his death. No, it was a long meal that included Scripture, and it included a remembrance of the Passover. And that's important as you go into the evening of his betrayal, arrest, and then his crucifixion. So at this point, what we're about to read, they have had the Passover Seder. Jesus has laid aside his garments, and he took a towel, he girded himself, and he's washed the feet of all the apostles. Judas Iscariot, who is sitting at the table with the men, has been called out by Jesus secretively. And Jesus said, one of you is going to betray me. And then he looks at Judas and he says to him, that thou doest, do quickly. Judas then gets up, leaves the table. The apostles, by and large, for the majority of their ministry, were in the dark on everything. They were very thick-headed, or we just don't give them the benefit of the doubt of how hard it was to grasp what we now know. But they never thought Judas was the guy, even though Jesus says to him, that thou doest, do quickly. He then gets up, leaves the table, and they still didn't realize what was going on. And they definitely didn't grasp his death and his resurrection. Verse 31, John chapter 13, that's the setting. John 13:31. Therefore, when he, referring to Judas Iscariot, was gone out, Jesus said, now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God be glorified in him, God shall also glorify him in himself, and shall straightway glorify him. Cue 22 eyebrows raising. Because you're all pretending like you know what that means. Right? You keep your head down. Don't look up. He might not see my bewildered look. And we just stare down at the Scriptures. But let's be honest. If you're the disciples, you don't know Jesus is going to die, be buried, and rose again, and he says those things, you're just like, what was in the grape juice? Like, this is crazy. They don't know what's going on. But they understand what he's about to say in verse 33. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. Period. There's probably a good pause while they all grasp what he just said. He said, I'm leaving you very soon. He goes on to say, ye shall seek me, and as I said unto the Jews, whither I go, ye cannot come. So now I say to you the same thing. And while they're thinking about losing their Messiah, he says, a new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another. As I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. I doubt they heard a word of what he just said there, because they're still trying to process that first statement that was beyond them, that second statement that they understood he was leaving, and where he was going they couldn't go, and their minds are spinning about losing their master. And then he says, by the way, I want you to love each other, and everyone will know you're my disciples if you love each other. Verse 36, this is how I know none of them heard the love commandment. Simon Peter said unto him, Lord, where are you going? Whither goest thou? Jesus answered him, where I go, whither I go, thou canst not follow me now, but thou shalt follow me afterwards. Peter said unto him, Lord, why can't I follow thee now? Why can't I go with you now? Peter is awesome. He would say what everyone was thinking. And what they were thinking was, oh no. There was true panic in the minds of these grown men, these 11 grown men who for the past 3 years have been with Christ day in and day out, night in and night out. And I want you to do your best to put yourself in their shoes this morning, because to appreciate what Christ is about to say, you have to put yourself in their shoes. Try to be a first century Jewish worshiper, not a 21st century Christian worshiper. And try to put yourself in the shoes of these men who have given up their lives to be with Christ. Remember, they were fishing. They were collecting taxes. They were operating a doctor's practice. They were building buildings. They were doing things that would get them money to pay for their food to survive under a Roman dictatorship. That's what they were focused on. This man named Jesus shows up and says, hey guys, just leave your nets, come follow me. No contract is signed, no promises that I'll make sure your family's needs are met. I'll make sure you get a salary. I'll make sure you get a housing allowance. I'll make sure you get medical insurance. I'll take care of you. Why don't you just come sign up with my ministry? No, guys, why don't you just leave what you're doing and come follow me? What are we going to do? I'll make you fishers of men. They did that. They gave up everything. They gave up everything they knew to follow Christ, and they followed him for 3 years. And they learned that he was so much more than just a charismatic teacher. These are men who are not mere students of a seminary professor. These are men who are not new church members to a charismatic preacher. These are men who are not just following this revolutionary figure. These are men who gave up everything to follow Christ and to be with him for 3 years. And they did that passionately. They did that loyally, independently. They did that for Jesus. And yeah, they were deeply flawed, at times severely distracted by their own ambition and carnality, but they have spent every bit of 3 years with Christ. He was not just part of their lives. He was not just the Baptist church I go to on Sunday morning, maybe if I'm really excited Sunday night, and if I'm crazy on Wednesday night. No, they went to be with Jesus every day of every week of every year for 3 years. And he just says, I'm out, guys. And where I'm going, you can't come. And these guys are thinking, what? We can't go back to what we were doing. It's just not that easy. And why would we? What we've got going on here is awesome. We're taking on the world. I mean, we were catching fish. Now we're catching men. We were collecting taxes. Now we're collecting multitudes of people. We were raising an income for our families, but now we're taking on hell. We're casting out devils. You can't leave us now. Jesus, you gave us purpose. You gave us significance. You took us from doing the mundane, the ordinary, and now we've got something that nobody else brought us. And you're going to leave us? That's why Peter said, "What? Why can't I go with you now? I don't want to go through life without you." Understand their mindset on this perplexing evening, and then understand what Peter says at the end of verse 37. He says to Jesus, After asking that question, he said, I will lay down my life for thy sake. That wasn't a hasty and insincere statement by Peter. It was an indication of how much he meant to them. Now that's foreign to us because there are very few in our world today that would truly give up their lives for Christ. We say we would, but we probably wouldn't even give up our job for Christ. We have a hard time giving up 1/10 of our income for Christ. And Peter is saying, I'll lay down my life for thy sake. He meant every bit of that. Every bit of that. But then Jesus says this devastating statement to him. Verse 38, Jesus answered him, will you though? Wilt thou lay down thy life for my sake? And you can just see Peter just with passion, and I think it's not a stretch to suggest with tears in his eyes. Yes. Jesus says, verily, verily, I say unto thee, the cock shall not crow till thou hast denied me thrice. The conversation in Peter's mind went from bad to worse. It went from frightening to devastating. It went from, you're going to leave me here, to not only are you going to leave me here, but you're telling me I'm going to deny you 3 times? That's the context as we read verse number 1 of John chapter 14. Let not your heart be troubled. It's the danger of reading chapter and verse is you lose context sometimes. Chapter 14 does not take place weeks or days or even hours after chapter 13. This is all the evening of the Passover. So Jesus has had the Passover with his men. He's washed their feet. He has told them that one of them is going to betray them. He then tells Judas that he needs to do it. So off he goes, and Jesus says, it's go time now, gentlemen, no turning back. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm going to leave you pretty soon. And where I'm going, you can't go with me. And Peter says, I'm going with you, and I'm going to lay down my life for you. And Jesus says, I wish that were true, my man, but you're actually going to deny me 3 times tonight. At that table, all of these men, there are 11 of them, their countenance is dropped. The blood is out of their face. They're white. They're fearful. They're insecure. They're uncertain. They're just devastated. Peter can't think about anything. When would I ever deny you? How could I ever do that? I'll take on the world for you. And he's just puzzled by these things Jesus is saying. And Jesus sees them all. There's no life in them. It's gone. And he just says, guys, let not your heart be troubled. Now, I think he's speaking specifically to Peter, but to all of them at the same time. But I think he's looking right through Peter's eyes. And he's saying, I know it. I know it's a bummer. I know you don't want me to go. I know you need me. I know you want me. And I know it kills you to hear that I just prophesied by my foreknowledge you're going to deny me. But don't let your heart be troubled. And when they hear that, they think, easy for you to say, you're getting out of here. You're leaving us alone. You're leaving us to the dogs. You're leaving us to the Romans and to the Jewish people. Easy for you to say. But what he says next changes the context of where their minds were at the time. And this morning we're going to talk about Jesus, the blessed assurance. Because what he's about to say, it's for those men and their mindset, their emotional well-being, their spiritual well-being, but it is also for all the believers ever since. Because we go through life, and we at times just think, where are you? We think at times, where have you been? We think at times we're left alone. We think at times nothing's going well. And these words are for you as much as they were for the apostles. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God? Of course we do. Then believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. He doesn't rebuke Peter for what he knows he'll do. He doesn't rebuke the other 10 men for what he knows they'll do, which they'll also forsake Christ. He doesn't tell these guys, get your act together. Come on, pull it together. It's not time for you to feel sorry for yourself. You just need to hang in there and get going. And he doesn't do that. He just says, let's talk about where I'm going. Don't let your hearts be troubled. If you believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. Now, you sit here and you say, I've heard that before if you're a believer. And you say, yeah, of course, no biggie. I've heard that before. But I want you to look at it through the eyes of a first century Jewish man. Because this is going to sound strange to you. Jesus is trying to reassure them of something that you and I may rarely think about. But in the Old Testament, they just didn't talk about heaven. Which is foreign to us because that's all we talk about. That's like the go-to, how to deal with our problems. Heaven, one day we're going to heaven. Heaven's wonderful, heaven's there. But these Old Testament Jewish worshipers, they didn't think about heaven the way we think about heaven. They believed in a third heaven. They knew that there was a heaven. They knew that God was the ruler of heaven. They knew that God sat on the throne of heaven. There were prophets who saw that, and there were men who talked about it. But very rarely, if ever, do you hear a man of God in the Old Testament talk about how we're going there. Rarely, if ever, do you hear any of them refer to the afterlife as a place where they can go and be relieved from this world and go and be with God. I can only think of David, frankly, who lost a baby, and he said of that baby, he said, that baby will not come to me, but I will go to him. But even in that context, David doesn't say, I'm going to go be with God in heaven. Because they didn't talk about it. In fact, whenever they talked about death, mortality, they talked about a finality. They talked about the grave. The Old Testament Jew was not looking forward to going to be with God in heaven. They were looking forward to the resurrection that would take place at the end of time. And it was there in the resurrection that they would all be resurrected to enjoy a Jewish kingdom on the earth. I know, that sounds crazy, but read the Old Testament, Genesis to Malachi, that's what you're going to find out. So when Jesus says to these guys, I'm going to leave, where I'm going you can't go, let's talk about that place. In my Father's house are many mansions. That to them was just like, what? What are you talking about? In my Father's house, that's got to be heaven, are many mansions? Well, no prophet ever revealed mansions in heaven, and nobody ever talked about heaven as though people would be there. So for them to hear that there are many mansions, that would clearly infer that it is designed to be a place for people, and therefore a place for people and God to be, and that is mind-blowing to an Old Testament Jew, while it may not be to a New Testament Christian. Have you ever considered where the Jewish people prayed towards when they prayed? They did not pray to the heavens, they prayed to Jerusalem. Why? Because their hope was in Jerusalem. Their hope was a Messiah would come to Jerusalem, establish an earthly kingdom, and they were going to have the earth even in a resurrected form. We as Christians, we don't look towards Jerusalem or to the earth, we look to heaven because it's a whole different story for us now, thanks to John chapter 14. So there was a disconnect in the Old Testament between heaven and the saints. But for you and for me, it's a different story. For you and for me, it's fact. It's fact. But these guys needed to hear what they had not learned up until that point. They needed to know that there was sufficient space provided for them in heaven. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. Jesus was telling his men who were devastated by this news of his departure, he told them, I'm going to a place where there is plenty of room for you. Now I know that's just like, whatever, boring to us. But to these men, it was eye-opening, it was thought-provoking, and it gave them hope. Oh, you're going somewhere? You're going to heaven? And that's not what we expected. We expected you to set up a kingdom here on earth. You're going somewhere, and it's a place where people go? Oh, now there's some reassurance coming to them about their relationship with Christ. And there's many mansions, not just one that we hope we get into. We have to get in line and get there first or get my reservation so I can get a room. There's lots of mansions. There's plenty of rooms. Jesus was about to, in 43 days or so, he was about to ascend to the right hand of God. And where he was going, there were many mansions, plenty of room for the apostles, plenty of room for you and for me. Jesus right now now, as we talk about Jesus Christ, right now he is seated on the right hand of God. And in that place where he is, there are certainly angels all around and creatures above and things we can't even imagine. Eye hath not seen, ear hath not heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things that God has prepared for them. But right now in heaven, there are many, many mansions, meaning there is plenty of space, a lot of room for people. People like you and me, people like our children and grandchildren yet to be born. There's no space issues in heaven, and there is a particular space prepared for you and for me. Look at verse number 2. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. Gentlemen, I would have told you. It's all good. I go. You want to know where I'm going? I go to prepare a place for you guys. Peter, I'm going where you can't go now, you will come later, but I'm going to a place where there are a lot of mansions, and I'm going to prepare one for you. John, get your chin off the table. Come on, focus. I'm going to a place where there are many mansions, and I'm going to prepare a place for you. You see, it's at this point in their lives, they're so insecure, they're so unsure of what the future holds that he's telling them ultimately, I'm going away, but I'm going away for a really good reason. I'm going away, you're going to find out in the future, but I'm going away to finish the job. I'm going to present my blood to the Father, and that will cover the sins of mankind so that whosoever calleth upon my name shall be saved. And I'm going up there as well to prepare a place for you guys. That's why he is the blessed assurance. Jesus, right now, what's he doing? He's sitting at the right hand of God. He's implanting us into heaven. He's interceding for us in heaven. He is inspiring us from heaven. And by his own words, he said he is preparing a place for us in heaven. A particular place for us in heaven. Now, we don't have a clue what that means. We think of mansions and we think of the big, beautiful mansions in our world, and I don't know if it means that in heaven, nor do you. We sing a song in our hymnals, I've got a mansion just over the hilltop. Those are great words. We don't know if that's the case. I don't know if it's over the hilltop, but I don't know if it's going to be our idea of a mansion. I just know this. Jesus is preparing right now a place for me. I'd like to say for you too, I just don't know where your soul is, but on May 11th, 1983, I called upon him as my Savior. He forgave my sins, and he began preparing me a place. I don't have a clue what that looks like. I just know this much. There is a place reserved for me. Little old me in heaven where God dwells, the Father of Christ, where Christ himself dwells, where all the angels are. I have a place for me. I don't know what it looks like. There may be a door tag with my name. There may be a mailbox with my name. There may be a doorbell with a fun emoji that's just for me. I don't know, but Jesus, he is preparing a place for me. He's making a bed for me. He's picking out my sites for me. He's getting everything lined up for me. He's filling my cupboards for me. You know, some of you are excited about that. That's fine. That's why you're a New Testament Christian. You're bored with the amazing grace of God. And I'm not blaming anybody. We hear it all the time. It becomes second nature. But for an Old Testament Jew who would never think about heaven in these terms, would hear Jesus say, I'm going to leave, but I'm going to get a place for you in heaven with me. That is mind-blowing for them. Mind-blowing. But they now could see Jesus as not just a departing Messiah, but as a Messiah who is going ahead to prepare a place for them. When I travel with my family or with my wife, I do all the planning, and so I will research the best place to stay in, and if it's a hotel or an Airbnb, I'll call ahead or do it online, and I'll reserve it. I'll pay for it, make sure it's in my name, and I show up there, and I'll tell them who I am, and they'll get on their computer systems, and they'll give me the key card, and they'll say, well, this room is for you, Mr. Kabel, and it's room whatever, and you can go down there. Well, I go in that room, and that's great, and it's like every other room. And I realize that when I show up, the hotel clerk doesn't know who I am. And when I go down through the halls, nobody could care less who I am. I'm just one of many using the same old rooms that everybody else uses. And that's fine. But I'm telling you, heaven is not the same. Yes, I have a reservation paid by God himself through the blood of Jesus Christ. But when I show up, I don't have to say who I am. When I show up, I don't have to go in there and say, hey, my name's Kevin Kabel. I've got a room somewhere in this great place called heaven. And Jesus is going to say, listen, I know who you are. In fact, I have a place just for you. He has prepared a place just for me. That's incredible. That's amazing to me. It's extraordinary. I can't wait to see what he has prepared for me. And the marvel of this to the apostles is that heaven was designed for us to be with God. In the layout, the structure of heaven, we have been factored in. I have been considered to God. I've been considered as somebody that matters to how heaven is laid out. I think that's extraordinary. Verse number 3, I don't want to bore you with these, heavenly things, but verse number 3, let's get into the final piece of Jesus, the blessed assurance. He's trying to reassure his men, and he's today reassuring us. He says in verse 3, and if I go and prepare a place for you, well, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. He assured his apostles, and he assures us today that there is a plan in place to put us in our particular place in heaven. I know this sounds crazy to an unbeliever. It would have sounded crazy to a Jewish Old Testament worshipers. You have to remember, the Old Testament saints, they would listen to their prophets, and the prophets would say, God is going to send the Christ, the Messiah, the promised one, a prophet like unto Moses. He is going to come and establish global dominance for the Jewish people. That's all they ever heard. That's all they ever heard. So when Jesus comes, he's born of a virgin in Bethlehem, just like the prophet said he would be, but he came and wasn't establishing global dominance. He wasn't destroying the government of Rome. He was a carpenter. He was, doing miracles, but not taking on the government. So the Jewish people said, well, this can't be him. He, of course, dies. We know that. He resurrects. And Jesus has been forgotten by the Jewish people to this day as the Messiah, because they believe their prophets that he was coming, and he was going to come to stay and establish this kingdom. So for the apostles who believed he was the Messiah, for Jesus to say to them, hey guys, I'm going to leave, but I'll be back. For them, that was not prophetically accurate. For them, they're like, no, the Messiah doesn't go and come back again. But yet, they knew he was the Messiah, so their minds were just everywhere. That you're going to leave us, but come back? Okay. Now, it sounds crazy to the average person today that Christians believe Jesus Christ is literally coming back to this planet. It's crazy talk. But Jesus said he's coming back. And if he said he was going to rise again from the dead 3 days after being crucified by the Romans, and he did rise again, then if he said he's coming back, then he's coming back. If Jesus, who walked on water, said he's coming back, then I'm going to take his word for it. If Jesus, who raised the dead, who cast out devils, who cleansed the leper, who healed the blind, if Jesus said he's coming back, then I'm not betting against him. He's coming back. And if you believe that to your core, if you believe Jesus is coming back, then do you understand the power of Jesus' promise and how he is the blessed assurance? Because if you truly believe that Jesus is coming back for you, then what do we have to fear in this world? And what do we have to concern ourselves with that would get us so down in despair if Jesus is coming back? He's coming back. There's a plan in place. I'm here this morning to tell you exactly what it is. God has shown me what it is. I'm going to give you a day and month and hour of when Jesus is coming back. So write this down. You'll need to know what it is. Wait. If I knew when he was coming back, how would it help me today if I knew it was 3,000 years from now? It wouldn't, would it? In fact, if I knew exactly when Jesus was coming back, would I have any hope that he's coming back right now? Unless I knew it was right now. But if I knew it was in, say, 2026, would I be waking up in the morning and hoping today could be the day Jesus is going to come back like he said? If I knew it was in 3 years, would I have any hope? No. And yet Paul said of Christ's return, he said we in Titus 2 are looking for that blessed hope and glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior, Jesus Christ. So that means we have hope every day that Jesus could return and appear. Right? So then why would Jesus tell his apostles when he's coming back? He wouldn't. In fact, he didn't. In fact, we don't know. All these clowns who continue to predict, they just make fools of themselves. Fools of themselves. If Jesus didn't tell us, he ain't going to tell anybody else on YouTube. If Jesus didn't tell his apostles, he's not telling some guy in the basement or garage of his house trying to make money on YouTube by having all those people fall for him. Jesus ain't telling nobody. It needs to be a blessed hope. We need to wake up every day just saying to ourselves, I don't know when he's coming, but it may be today. Now, there's a big debate. In fact, as soon as Jesus said, I will come again, immediately theologians all over the world who knew anything about him began to debate, and that's happened for 2,000 years about when he's coming back and where he's coming back and how he's coming back and how many times he's coming back. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have a clue, I don't have a clue, and we shouldn't put any time frame on it. It's a blessed hope. That being said, I just spent 2 hours over some delicious pizza on Thursday night with another pastor discussing this very issue. And it was a fascinating conversation. And we concluded, as should anyone who has a Bible in their hands who believes it to be the Word of God, we have concluded that there is only one definitive certain time that Jesus is coming back, and it's at the end of the Great Tribulation, a time called Jacob's Trouble, and it's a time in Revelation 19 that Jesus comes soaring down to the earth and initiates what we know as the Battle of Armageddon and destroys all who reject him and establishes a great millennial kingdom, and hallelujah. That's going to be a great time. I know that. I know that with certainty that Jesus is coming back then. Now, this man that I met with and myself, we disagreed on the next part. And the next part is this. I'm not putting Jesus in a box. If he wants to come back before then and then, I'm going to let him do that. This man would say to me that what I believe is not biblical, it's not accurate. And I may be unbiblical, I may be inaccurate. But I'm not putting Jesus in a box. Because he said in John chapter 14, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go, I will come again and receive you unto myself. He never told those guys when he's coming back. Never. So, if he wants to come back 3 times, it's up to him. If he wants to come back 2, you say he wouldn't do that. Didn't the Old Testament prophets get in trouble when they looked down the future pipeline and they saw the Messiah coming and they said when he comes, he's going to establish a kingdom right here? Didn't they get in trouble when they assumed he was coming once and in reality, he came back here in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago? He then died 30-some years later. He's no longer on the scene, but he is coming back to do what they initially saw him doing. So I don't want to ever make the same mistake they did and say that Jesus is only coming once again. He may come back twice, which is why right now our church, in our statement of faith, we believe in a pre-tribulational return of Christ to take the bride away. Presently, I believe that. But I believe that without knowing exactly when he's coming, because he didn't tell us he's coming before the tribulation, during the tribulation. I know he's coming after the tribulation, but I just happen to believe, based on John 14 and 1 Thessalonians 4 and a few other places, that I think he might come before the tribulation. You say, well, you're wrong, Pastor Kabel. It's my blessed hope. And yeah, I can put all of my pre-tribulational doctrinal scriptures into the post-tribulational element, and it might work. But of all those scriptures, nowhere does it say Jesus isn't coming back before the Great Tribulation. Nowhere in the Bible does Jesus say, I'm not coming back till Revelation 19. He's coming back then, but he might come back sooner, and I believe he's going to. And if he doesn't, oh well. Oh well. If he doesn't come back when I want him to, oh well. I'm going to live every day as though he may come back. Because why would he tell the apostles to hang in there? Hang in there. In my Father's house there are many mansions, and I go to prepare a place for you guys. And if I go, I'm going to come back and receive you unto myself. Why would he tell them that if they had to go through this horrific tribulational period before he came back? That would not be totally reassuring at the time. Maybe that was his plan, but he just said, guys, I'm coming again. Don't worry about everything in between. Just focus on me. Keep your mind on me. Have the blessed hope of my return, and all will be well. What am I saying to you this morning? I'm saying to you, do not put Jesus Christ's return in a prophetic box that only you and your camp knows when he's coming back. Do yourself a favor, leave it wide open for him to make the decision when he wants to make the decision and when he wants to descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel. Let him say, it's time to get my bride. If that ends up being after some horrific things and it ends up fitting the end of the tribulation, well, that's up to him. But until that happens, I'm going to keep looking up, because there is a place prepared for me in heaven. Not just to avoid all the terrible stuff on the earth, but there is a place for me to be with Christ. Remember, why were they so down? That Jesus was leaving them alone in a very hard world with bad Roman people? Or were they devastated that they were being left without him? They weren't looking forward to a new body and to a place where there is no death and a place where there is no sin and a place where there is no Satan and a place that all wrongs are made right. No, they were missing his presence. And he says, don't worry. In my Father's house are many mansions, enough for all you guys. And I'm going to go prepare a place just for you so that where I am, there you may be also. We will be together again. You see, looking forward to Christ is not looking forward to getting out of this world. It's looking forward to being with Christ. You got to get to know him, to long to be with him. I know this is super boring stuff, but when you're on your deathbed, there will be nothing more precious to you. You will not care how many Super Bowls the Bills lost. You will not care how much money is in your bank account. You will not care how many times your friend broke your heart. You will not care how many posts you get liked on your social media site. You will care about one thing on your deathbed. Should you have the mental capacity to grasp it, you will care where you are going and who you are going to be with. And if you know Jesus Christ as your Savior, you will be ecstatic, not just to leave the old world behind, but to finally be with him face to face, where you can have the fellowship that these apostles longed to have. They wanted to be with him because he alone gives us life. He alone gives us pleasure and joy. I'll just throw this in here, but Peter and Paul both thought the return of the Lord was imminent in their day 2,000 years ago. So I'm just saying they thought that Jesus was referring to any moment and any time. They didn't put God in a box. They just kept their eyes on high, and they said, we can't wait to see you, Jesus. We can't wait to see you, Jesus. Now, I'll tell you this. If that's not your mindset today, it's because you care too much about yourself. The only reason you would want to go see Jesus is because you love him more than yourself. But it's hard in our culture because we wake up and look at the mirror. And before we go to bed, we look in the mirror. You notice that wherever you brush your teeth, there's usually a mirror. So it's, hey, you, sweetheart. And at nighttime, oh, precious, it's so good to see you again. And then we dream all night about who? Right? We wake up and like, it's you again. You are something special. Why would we look forward to seeing Jesus when life's all about us? Because if I leave this world, come on, young people, been there, done that. If I leave this world, I won't be able to experience me time, marriage, children, grandchildren, finishing my career, experiencing all the things they want to in this world. I want to go to this place. I want to go to that place. And I want to get in me time because me time is more important than Jesus. You see the danger of our culture being so absorbed with self? Under the Roman occupation in Israel, it was not about me time. It was about survival time. It was about taking care of our family and getting through it. Jesus offered them something that went above and beyond Roman Empire, above and beyond Judaism, culture, heritage, history. It went to, hey guys, in my Father's house, there are many mansions. And I'm going to get one set up just for you. And if I go, you can be sure I'm coming back. That where I am, you guys can be also, and it'll be grand. It'll be grand. It's a love story. Do you see the love story? It's Jesus dying for his friends. Greater love hath no man than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. He lays down his life for his friends, and he goes into a far country where he builds a home and gets it all set up, and he decorates the walls, and he landscapes the property, and he says, I'll be right back to the house, and he goes and gets his love that he died for, and he brings her into a place that he built, and here we can spend the rest of, in this case, eternity together. It's precious. I have to have you look at one more verse before we go, just because it's too important, and we'll be done. This is Jesus, the blessed assurance. He's reassuring his terrified, insecure apostles. But Thomas, in, verse number 4, Jesus says, and whither I go ye know, and the way ye know. And Thomas, so honest, Lord, we don't have a clue what you're talking about. Lord, we know not whither thou goest. You talk about your Father's house. We've never heard of this before. We know not whither thou goest, and how can we then know the way? Jesus saith unto him, oh, listen, Jesus says to his men who are terrified, they're insecure, they want to be with Christ. They don't know where he's going, but they want to be with him. And he says, show us the way. And Jesus says, Thomas, I am the way. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. My Father's house that I was talking about, listen, he said, no man cometh unto the Father but by me. Guys, you don't need to go back to the temple and do all the sacrifices. Gentlemen, you don't have to cast out devils. Gentlemen, you don't have to give money to the temple. Gentlemen, you don't have to be a perfect person in the rest of your life. I'm telling you, if you want to go to my Father's house, no man goes to the Father but through me. I'm the way. To which they should have just said, oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Because they didn't know where he's going. They didn't know how to get there. And he says, it's through me. To which they all said, oh, we know you. We know you. So we're good then. Yep. Do you know Christ this morning? There's no way to the Father's house. There's no way to a mansion prepared for you in the sky. There's no way to eternity with God outside of Jesus Christ. He doesn't need your help. He doesn't need my help. You'll never find heaven through the portals of some temple or some church or some cathedral. You'll never find heaven through a lifetime of good deeds. You'll never find heaven through a lifetime of great sacrifice. You can give up your kidney to somebody that won't get you into heaven. You can give all your money to the poor that won't get you into heaven. The only way to heaven, listen to Jesus. He said, I am the way. I am the highway to heaven. I am the truth. I am eternal life. No man, I don't care when they were born, who they are, where they come from, how smart they are, how good they are. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. And they didn't understand at the time, but Jesus said on the cross as he hung there with his arms wide open, me, my death. I am sacrificing myself. I am pouring my blood out to pay for your sins. You just have to go through that fountain, and what a fountain it is. Let's stand and have a word of prayer.